Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So this is going to be a bit of a different episode, and many of you, like myself, might have seen these kinds of cards on things like Reddit and been like, what in the world are these, and why are they previewing now, and why have I not heard that there is a spoiler season going on right now? My goodness, Mitch, what are you doing? Don't you know you've got like 40,000 quick takes to do, and you need like 18 more cups of coffee? Yeah, well, luckily for me, it is not a spoiler season, and actually I think I still have a break from spoiler season until, I believe, late January. Regardless, that is just completely separate. The big question on today's episode, though, are what are these alchemy commanders? What in the world is alchemy? And as a commander player, should you care? So with all that said, let's jump into it. So, just a little while ago, Wizards announced a brand new format on Magic the Gathering Arena known as Alchemy. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, if it's a Magic the Gathering Arena format, why in the world should I care? Because, Mitch, you don't have an Arena channel. Well, this, of course, is the perfect time for me to announce I'm completely changing this channel into an Arena channel and renaming it Arena Quarters, and that's a joke. I'm, of course, not serious about that. Logo's pretty cool though. Anyways, let's just first talk about what alchemy is and what its potential impact on Magic as a whole might be. And apologies, but I'm just going to be reading verbatim from the Wizards article, so here we go. Alchemy is our new MTG Arena play mode based on the standard format that incorporates new to digital Magic alongside rebalanced standard cards to create a fast, ever-evolving experience for our players. In ever-evolving play mode, build decks with standard cards new to digital and rebalance cards in a new MTG Arena play mode that evolves as fast as our players. New to digital cards. Alchemy will launch with 63 new-to-digital Magic cards featuring mechanics designed specifically for digital play, and players can expect more new cards alongside every standard set release. Rebalanced Magic cards. Alchemy features rebalanced versions of existing standard cards to shake up the meta for digital play. Players can expect these regular changes to the format to create a dynamic play experience between standard set releases. So essentially this is something that many Magic players have hypothesized would happen at some point ever since Arena was essentially announced. By moving Magic into the digital space and making it a digital game like Hearthstone, there are a lot of possibilities. You can simply do a lot of things a lot easier digitally, or things that are essentially impossible in paper. For example, let's quickly take a look at some of the new Innistrad Alchemy cards. And yes, I probably should already mention this if I haven't already, that these Alchemy cards are also going to be legal on top of being legal in Alchemy in Historic, Brawl, and similar digital-only formats. So obviously, since these are digital-only cards, they are not legal in paper formats because, well, they don't exist in paper formats. And you can see why as we get into cards like Begin Anew. It's a sorcery for green, white, and it says destroy all creatures, which, yes, that there are plenty of cards that do that in Magic, but there aren't cards in paper that say creature cards in your hand perpetually get +1/+1. Yeah, that's a mechanic that really can't exist in paper, or at least if it did exist, it would be incredibly difficult to keep track of. Just imagine casting this in an actual game of Commander. Yeah, you blow up the board, and then you can say, okay, I've got 3 creatures in my hand. I need to remember that these get +1/+1, but not anything else that I draw into. And how are my opponents supposed to know that I've got the right ones marked down as these get +1/+1? It's just really complex and really not worth the effort to try to use cards like this in a paper game. Versus in a digital game, obviously this all just happens automatically, so yeah, there's nothing extra that you have to keep track of because the game just does it for you. And obviously with that too, there's no cheating and being like, no, I swear this card in my hand was definitely there, and yeah, now it's get ++1. Regardless, let's go on to another example with Clone Crafter. It's a 1/2 human wizard for 1 and a blue that says, when it enters the battlefield, conjure a duplicate of a random creature card from your opponent's library into your hand. It perpetually gains, you may spend mana as or mana of any color to cast this spell. So again, if this card were to somehow try to function in a paper game, this would be absolutely obnoxious to try to pull off. Basically, your opponent would have to go through their entire library, pull out all the creatures into a separate pile, shuffle those cards up, and then have you randomly select a creature from those. Then once you selected that creature, you would need to kind of draw up a copy of that creature and put it into your hand. And obviously, nowhere on this card does it say that your opponent, has to reveal their library or gets to shuffle their library, so yeah, this just basically doesn't work in a paper game. And the Trollop's Disciple is another one that kind of could work in a game of Commander or in paper games, but would be kind of obnoxious as well. It's a 3/3 human warrior with haste that costs 2 and a red, and it says, when it attacks, conjure 4 cards named Lightning Bolt into your library, then shuffle. Again, in a digital-only game, no problem. And yeah, you could pull this one off in paper, but you need a giant stack of lightning bolts on the side of your library just ready to shuffle in, and they need to have the exact same sleeves as the other cards in your deck too. So yes, that is doable, but obviously a lot more doable in digital. Now, another thing that I mentioned earlier, and Omnath players out there, please don't panic because you're completely fine. Let's take a look at a rebalance card. So as you can see in the top left corner of this card with Omnath Locus of Creation, there's a little arena symbol up there, and that basically means that this card's been rebalanced and it's for, alchemy or arena or whatnot, etc., etc. Regardless, there are some differences that you might notice on this Omnath versus the paper one. It's a 4/4 elemental, that's the same. The mana cost has 1 more mana to it with that generic mana on it, and when it enters the battlefield, you scry 1 instead of the draw 1 on the actual Omnath. Again, in that article, they mentioned that they'd be rebalancing cards in Alchemy. So instead of banning cards in that format, they're just going to be rebalanced, and yeah, Omnath was definitely banned in Standard for a lot of reasons. Even though I'm not a Standard player, I heard all about it. Regardless, obviously, a change like this does not impact Commander players at all. You do not need to update your Omnath and, draw on it an extra mana symbol and then cross out the draw and put scry 1. This does not impact paper at all. But if you play Historic Brawl, this does impact you. Because if you've got an Omnath Historic Brawl deck, your Omnath deck is now weaker because Omnath costs 1 more and now just scries instead of draws. So my apologies to you. And that's actually kind of the crux of this and the main question I want to ask, and actually a question that's been asked ever since Arena started, is will Commander ever come to Arena? And yes, I know Brawl is a thing again like I just mentioned, but come on, it's not the same. Alchemy obviously, again, brings up a lot of possibilities of what cards can do and what commanders can do, and we'll get to those commanders here in just a bit. But yeah, there's a couple of questions that need to be answered. First of all, and I think the main question is, will Wizards ever get every single card that is legal in Commander onto Arena? Currently, and my apologies if I'm incorrect on this, but if you type in Legal Historic on Scryfall, that should give you about the number of cards that are legal in Arena, I think. Again, my apologies if I'm incorrect, but it looks like there's around 6,000 cards on Arena. And that's a large amount of cards, but when it comes to actually what Commander has legal, there's 22,000 cards. So that's nearly 4 times as many, and yeah, is Wizards actually going to go back and add in every single old card? I mean, just look in the bottom right, Abbey Gargoyles. Do they care about that? Probably not. Regardless, if they were to try to make Commander on Arena, they would have to put every single card in there because, again, all those cards are legal, and though Abbey Gargoyles is a terrible card, and sorry, Abbey Gargoyles, for picking on you, it's probably still used in some decks, or at least players should have the option of using it if they want to. And also with that, there are some really janky old cards that work in some really weird ways that can be really difficult to program, so are they willing to go through all that effort to do so? I doubt it. And even if you were to get every single card from Magic's history into Arena, could you also make it into a 4-player game instead of 2, which again, Arena is limited to just 2 players, and Commander is very much a multiplayer format with 4. Now, first off, I'm not sure exactly how hard that is to implement in code, but just think about the crazy board states that happen in a game of Commander, and try to see that on a screen. With 4 players doing some crazy things and maybe making hundreds of tokens and trying to see what all's on the board, instead of 2. And the third question I want to bring up is, well, Does Commander even belong in a digital environment? Because that kind of eliminates that social aspect of the game, which I think is actually the most important part of the game and what makes Commander the best format in Magic. So the first two questions might be technical, but the third question is more, should they even do it, or would they even want to try it? Regardless, obviously I can't tell the future, so I have no idea if it's ever going to happen or something similar is going to happen, but it's just some interesting things to think about. And it's also really fun to see what kind of cool things can be done digitally with Commanders that might not work in paper. So now let's jump into those Alchemy Commanders that were revealed, and let's start off with Gitrog, Horror of Zava. This Gitrog is a 6/6 frog horror with menace that costs 2 black and green. So just 4 mana for a 6/6 with menace. Ouch. But it also has at the beginning of each combat, if Gitrog, Horror of Zava is untapped, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If they do, tap Gitrog, Horror of Zava, then seek a land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, it perpetually gains. Pay black-green, tap, sacrifice this land, draw a card. Now, Seek is a digital-only keyword action that basically makes it so that the game automatically chooses a random card meeting the specified criteria from the library and puts it in the hand without shuffling. So obviously this would be impossible in a paper game because, well, in order to actually meet that requirement, you'd have to look through your library and pick a card that meets that requirement. So this basically just gets you a random land into play from your library, and that land gains something perpetually, which again is something that you cannot do in a paper format. Or at least I should say it'd be incredibly difficult to keep track of, because again, that land perpetually gains it, which means no matter where that land goes, if you happen to sacrifice it and it goes into your graveyard, or get shuffled back in your library, it still has that ability. Again, some pretty interesting and unique things though that are going on here with a commander like this for a digital-only format. Moving on though, let's move on to Gutmorn, Pact-Bound Servant. Gutmorn is a 1/3 demon with flying and death touch that costs 2 and a black. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each player discards a non-land card. Whenever a player discards a card during your turn, they choose another player. That player conjures a duplicate of that card into their hand. It perpetually gains. You may spend mana or mana of any color to cast this spell. Conjuring is again something that really can't work in a paper format. When that discard happens and a player chooses for another player to conjure that card into their hand, they're getting a copy of that card. So yeah, I guess you could just drop a copy of that card and put it into that person's hand, but then what happens if that hand shuffles into their library? Maybe someone casts a wheel and then everyone takes their hand, shuffles in their library, and now that conjured card, which again is just drawn onto another card, is into the library and it would need the same sleeve, etc., etc. Lots of headaches there. But in a digital-only format, obviously this is no problem. It's still a really cool concept, and you could probably get away with playing it in paper, but still digital just makes it a lot easier for something like this. Next up though, let's move on to Oglor, Devoted Assistant. This is a 1/1 homunculus for 1 in a blue, and Oglor has at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put one of them into your graveyard. Whenever a creature card is put in your graveyard from your library or hand, it perpetually gains. When this card leaves your graveyard, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. So again, a cool concept, but it kind of has the exact same problem as the last commander we talked about, because again, adding perpetually to something isn't something that can really work easily in a card game that is in paper. Even more so than Gutmorn, Oglor is probably more likely to actually shuffle your graveyard into your library to get all those zombies, and when you do so, it's going to be really hard to keep track of what cards, had that perpetually added onto them, and yeah, it's just going to be a mess. Still a cool concept though, and again, kind of like a milling Tormod in a way. But now let's move on to Rahilda, Wanted Cutthroat. Rahilda is a 2/2 human werewolf with first strike that has, when it deals combat damage to a player, exile a non-land card from their library at random. During any turn you attack with a wolf or werewolf, you may cast that card and you may spend mana as though or mana of any color to cast that spell, Daybound. So then on the backside, we've got the 2/2 Rahilda, Feral Outlaw, a werewolf double strike. And then from what I can see, she basically has the exact same text as on the front. Though with Nightbound instead of Daybound. Anyways, regardless. So obviously, again, in a digital format, this works fine, but in a paper format, there are some problems. First off, it's impossible to exile a non-land card from someone's library at random. Sure, I guess you could ask the player how many cards in their deck. They could take the time to count all those cards. You could get a random number generator and then generate, what random number it is that you're selecting. But even after that happens, what happens if you select a land? Yes, you would have to do it again, but you would also know exactly where that land is in their deck, which again is not the point of this card. Because again, on this card, nowhere does it say shuffle. So yeah, the player isn't actually shuffling their deck because you're not looking through their deck. Now, could you actually implement this card in a reasonable way in a commander game? Yeah, and I'd probably be fine playing against someone who actually just printed this out and decided to use this as their commander. It would just have to be agreed upon that basically that player would just, take a card at random from your library, and if it's a land, do it again until they hit a non-land, and then basically shuffle your library afterwards. So again, somewhat doable in a paper format if you make some adjustments, but much easier in digital. Next up, though, let's talk about Captain Erbhard. Captain Erbhard is a 1/1 human soldier with double strike that costs 1 and a white. He also has spells you cast from on cards you drew this turn cost 1 less to cast. And spells cast from on cards your opponents drew this turn cost 1 more to cast. Yeah, this card actually has a similar problem to one mentioned earlier in this episode, which is, hey, how do I know or how do we keep track of which cards are in your hand and which ones you drew into? And yeah, it's kind of like an honesty policy at that point, and also people also forget too. And speaking of honesty, yeah, I'm not upset at all that this basically baby Grand Arbiter is not legal in Commander. Because yeah, there's a pretty brutal low-to-the-ground tax effect for a stacks deck. Finally, though, we've got Ishkana Brood Mother. Ishkana is a 3/5 spider with reach that costs 3 and a green. It has other spiders you control get +1/+2, and by paying 1 and a gruel, you exile 2 cards from your graveyard to draft a card from Ishkana Brood Mother's spellbook. Now, out of all the commanders mentioned in this episode so far, I think that this is the one that is probably the most easy to do when it comes to actually playing it in paper if you really wanted to. Basically, the spellbook is just a sideboard in a way. It's a list of cards that you have access to thanks to this commander when you utilize that ability. And hopefully I found the right link to the actual spellbook, and my apologies if I'm incorrect on this, but this is what I found. So, we have access to Drider, Spidery Grass, Sentinel Spider, Sporecap Spider, Hatchery Spider, Glowstone Recluse, Mammoth Spider, and Netcaster Spider, and actually 7 more with Arachnoform, Spider Spawning, Brood Weaver, Twin Silk Spider, Prey Upon, Snare Spinner, and Knotvolt Recluse. So obviously in a digital game, I'm assuming Wizards doesn't make you actually go and buy these extra cards to utilize with Ishkana. If they do, that might be a very Wizards thing to do, but I don't think they're going to do that. But if you were to do this in paper, obviously you would need to either proxy these cards or buy them and have them on the side of your deck to actually utilize and put them in the exact same sleeves, again, just in case they ever get shuffled in your library or whatnot. Regardless, one more thing really quick that I do want to bring up about Alchemy and how it could potentially impact Commander. One of the biggest Magic Arena, if not the biggest Magic Arena channel out there with Covert Go Blue, I believe said that Alchemy is going to be the biggest format, in their opinion, within a year on Magic Arena. And obviously this is a format that is separate from Standard on Arena, which again follows the exact same card pool and mechanics as actual Arena in paper, and it has to. So if that ends up happening and Alchemy becomes the most popular format on Arena, what are the implications? If Alchemy draws away players from playing Standard digitally, will it also draw players that are playing Standard physically? Are those paper card Standard players going to switch over to Alchemy? And if that happens, then they're switching from playing a paper card game, which again, those paper cards can be utilized for Standard or Modern or Commander, to a digital game, which again, Commander players aren't utilizing digital cards, obviously. So if that happens and there are less players that are actually playing Standard physically, what happens to the amount of packs that are open in a year, and what happens to the demand for certain cards and the price of certain cards? I am not in MTG Finance, so I'm not going to be answering that question. I am just posing it, that could have an impact. If Alchemy becomes big, it could have an impact on prices for Commander cards. Now again, I don't know what direction that impact would be, or if it would have an impact at all, but it's just an interesting question to think about. And actually, speaking of price, one more thing that I did want to mention, and probably should have mentioned earlier, is there'd have to be a change in model for Commander to actually work on Arena. Because at this point, the wildcard system on Arena would be nowhere near robust enough to actually allow players to play Commander in the way that they'd want to. Trying to build multiple decks that you actually want to build would pretty much be impossible. Again, with a card pool of 22,000 plus cards or whatnot, good luck getting the right ones that you want from opening up packs, or, the couple of wild cards that you get. And then if you change commanders or want a different kind of deck, good luck. Now, would Wizards ever do hey, if you're playing Commander, you just have to pay X amount of money a month and you get access to every single card? I don't think they would. Again, that's probably another reason that Commander will probably never be on Arena. There's just a lot of questions as to how in the world would Commander on Arena actually even work in the first place? What kind of model would they have? And would it even be worth it for them to do it again because of that social aspect of Commander that makes it so popular? So again, from this Alchemy announcement and from the new cards from it, some really interesting questions and interesting concepts came out of it, and yeah, just interesting things to talk about. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.